Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists,
but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our movie show, Stephen King Spooktacular. Once again, if you are joining us on video, you can see them already, but if you are listening with your ear holes, once again, we welcome Mr. Rob Dunkelberger and Michael Klug to the show. Woohoo! And, of course, I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are so happy to have you back with us for part 2 of talking about the movie adaptations of Stephen King movies. We went through 20 to 10. So we did 11 movies last week, meaning we got 9 spectacular movies to talk about today. But first, we are going to talk about we at the end, if you heard listen to the show last week, which of course I highly recommend that you do, because you know what, it was great. And I'm not even afraid to toot my own horn on that. Because it really was all me. No, I mean toot our horn, the collective horn. But we talked about, I'm going to check that movie out. Some of these that we didn't see. So the first order of business is to do just a quick check-in, because I know that some people did check out some movies that were on the list that they weren't familiar with. So I'm trying to remember. Michael, I know that you checked out.
Christine and Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot. All right. So how was revisiting Christine, and how was Salem's Lot?
Well, I mean, literally probably 30 years ago. I think I've maybe seen it once, maybe twice, and I was really blown away. Like, I 100% thoroughly enjoyed it in every aspect, and I mean, it might change my order a little bit, but I was very taken. I was actually very emotional. I thought everything was stunningly done, and it is one of those things, like, I feel like I've been missing out all these years, and maybe it just wasn't something that was supposed to connect to me at a younger age, and now it did. So
it was supposed to, but I think Rob had a point when he said it's one of Stephen's kind of, the whole idea of it is a little weird and a little high concept, and that's not going to be easy for everybody to grasp onto, even though the teenage hijinks or whatever in Christine you're supposed to be able to relate to all that stuff pretty easily.
Sure.
But I'll say what I say before, and I obviously it stood up for you when you watched it. It's the filmmaking is really, really strong. That's why I had it high on my list, which is I'm pretty sure why it snuck on our list altogether. So I don't think anybody else voted for it. But I just, I'm not I like John Carpenter a lot, but I'm not I'm not some huge super fan of his. But he, at that time, I mean, he knew what he was doing. That string of films between Halloween and let's say what's the weird Chinatown one?
Big Trouble in Little China, yeah.
It's just about every single one of those movies is really, really well made.
But I think what stood out to me most is that I don't think Carpenter's ever had something so well done as far as character development and a really solid group of people that you understood and cared about. And
I think Starman the next year comes close, but you
right.
made the point that he didn't write either of those.
Yeah.
When he's writing, he's not super concerned with that, or he knows he's going to be directing what he writes, and he sort of lets it happen on set.
Yeah.
Because the relationships, like in The Fog and stuff like that, on paper, I think they look pretty nebulous, but the actors, people do really bring something to it then. I think a writer who's not getting to direct his own work, who's writing a spec script or an adaptation, feels the need to get a lot more of that down there. I think both Christine and Starman benefit from
Yeah,
that.
it was really great, and we already ordered a DVD copy and and a book because like okay, we want this to be part of our collection now. So
Cool.
Very cool. And then
Salem's Lot, you say?
yeah, Salem's Lot. I don't think I've seen the 3 hour version. I must have seen some weird truncated version because there's things in there I'm like I don't remember this at all. You mentioned the coda in the previous episode, but I was really taken by the pacing, and then by the end of that, the last hour is just bat blank crazy, and I really some great scares. And you guys talked about last week the production design of the Marston house when Bonnie Bedelia actually goes in. I mean, both my husband and I just went, wow, and they had that long, really tall shot of the staircase. The kids up on the top level and Bedelia's down below. There was some breathtaking stuff in that film, and I was again like I have very at one time 100 years ago, and I'm also very taken by that. I was very impressed.
Oh, that's neat. That was our big one, right, Rob?
Yep.
Salem's
Yep.
Lot. That's good stuff. So that's cool that you had that experience with it.
For sure.
very cool.
How
Rob,
about you?
what did you
Dunk?
check
Did you
out?
watch
Rob?
something cool?
I checked out Gerald's Game and App Pupil that we talked about last week. And I think Gerald's Game might have probably belonged on my top 20. App Pupil was, very solid. Very solid. I don't think it was going to bump anything off, particularly if I put Gerald's Game up there. But yeah, I didn't have much of a recollection from the first time I saw it, and rewatching it, it's like, no, this is a very solid film, and it's has a whole different view on it now, given Bryan Singer's history.
Mhm.
There are a few things in there, particularly the end that Ryan mentioned with David Schwimmer, and that whole turn of events there. Is So I really enjoyed it. It wasn't gonna creep into my top 20, I don't think, but it's probably right in those next few. So I'm glad I rewatched it. And then I watched Sleepwalkers, which I'd seen once and instantly thought of as a terrible 80s movie. Maybe it's 90s, I'm not sure.
It's like 92,
right.
I think.
Yeah,
right there,
but watching
right there
it
in the
again,
transition.
it wasn't going to make it into the top 20 either, but it's a lot of fun. It's sort of like Firestarter or The Running Man for me or whatever. It's it's got a really good cast and a lot of cameos. Toby Hooper, John Landis, Joe Dante all have cameos. Mark Hamill has a cameo. So I was surprised that it actually was a little better than just a fun movie. It's still a crappy B movie, but in that fun way.
But it's part of our generation, I think, to look back on a crappy movie from 91 or 92 or whatever, and compare it to like the third Hellboy movie or the third Expendables movie, or the crap that they're putting out today has no value whatsoever. It's valueless. And that just old grandpa is saying, these B movies of today can get off my lawn. But when I revisit something that I thought was pretty bad from back then, it's still what it is, right? It doesn't shake me up. But something like Sleepwalkers, you watch it, you're like, oh, look, somebody, even if they're messing about, somebody is taking care with this to make this as good or whatever it is as they can. And I feel like that, when you trap a bunch of artists, hundreds of them, however many it took to make, like the Hellboy movie is a really good example, because it is absent any meaning or soul. It just feels worthless. That was directed by Neil, guy who made
Neil
The Descent.
Marshall, The Descent.
Yeah, good director. It's got a perfect rebooted Hellboy in it. The actor's great, and yet there's just no commitment to the meaning of any of it when you watch it. It's so frustrating. And Sleepwalker, some of these, whatever, Romero, I watched The Dark Half. This was a couple months ago. That's much better than I didn't like it at the time. That's much better than I remember.
Yep.
And it's because they cared about what they were doing. Truly, you can feel that it makes a difference. So
yeah, I thought that as I rewatched so many films that didn't make my list or whatever, The Dark Half, Needful Things, all of those, like, this is way better than I remembered it. You know, I had to reconsider Needful Things. It was making it into the top 20, and I
really
don't
wish
think
I could see
ultimately
the director's cut of Needful Things.
I know.
That's on my wish list.
Needful Things I haven't seen in a really long time, but I actually considered that for my top films because I just have very fond memories of that film.
It's a good one. It's certainly a consideration. It was of mine as well.
Yeah.
But I still feel like what we've seen is compromised. I just really want to see what it is that they shot and wanted to release.
Yeah. Needful Things and The Dark Half, they came out like the same year or one right after the other.
Yeah, pretty near.
They both have Alan Pangborn as a character in them, and they were written by Stephen King one after the other. Needful Things, or Dark Half first, and then Needful Things. And I always liked that carryover of that character. In fact, I always liked that in his stories and things as he creates this wider universe. That he peppers it with these names that are familiar. People come back and
he's not a world builder the way we think of it conventionally, but he really is. It really is a universe of his own mind that these things take place in, and that there's value in those different people, different locations, things like that showing up. There really is. It's very cool. Even in the movies, which are all, unique enterprises for the most part.
Right.
It's still cool, I think.
And it's interesting because when you talk about him not creating this universe necessarily, but sort of a world where he's in, just about every book he's ever written plays into the whole Dark Tower series. Father Callahan in Salem's Lot is a major character in one of the books of the Dark Tower, and all these characters get pulled into that in ways, and there's phrases in the books that relate to those. They're just like little Easter eggs that most people would miss if you haven't read the book that it's referencing. You're not going to catch it. So he does all these little things. So I think he has this multiverse in his head that he just lives there.
May we still someday get the HBO series of the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
What they did to that cinematically was
considering that, King considers that his master work, his whole, that's the he considers that sort of the culmination of everything that he's done.
And Ron Howard Ron Howard and Brian Greitzer want to produce a television series of it.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And that would be really, really awesome.
Who directed the film version?
Somebody.
Yeah.
Some guy that we hate.
Some guy.
Will never work again, probably.
Dark Tower was
Nicolas
Arcel.
It's not really his fault. He was Sony's puppet.
Yeah.
And Sony wanted a 90-minute Fast and Furious CG-laden piece of nonsense, and that's what he delivered. So
He took 8 books.
So I don't
condense it into 90 minutes.
I don't blame the director. It's not an auteur film. It was a studio hatchet job. So
he'll take the blame for it, though. He'll take the fall.
Of course,
somebody has to.
Yep.
It won't be McConaughey.
All right, I'll do it. God.
Sorry, how many million did you say? It was like the guy who made. We should get talking about our top 9, but the guy who made,
30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night.
I can't remember his name. David Slade. He was. There were rumors that he was going to be asked to do Twilight sequel, and he was on his Twitter account, poo-pooing that and talking about how Twilight's stupid and he would never do that. And then it turned out that those rumors were true, like later that afternoon. And the tweet stopped and everything just went silent, and then they started getting deleted. And you were just like, all his fans were like, guys, he's gonna do it. And sure enough, they announced the next director of Twilight, whatever, the 4th one, and a subsequent one were directed by him. And he came out later and he said, look, this established franchise, it's a guaranteed hit. It gets your name on something worth millions of dollars. It pays you residuals until you die.
Yeah.
Because you can't say no to it. And he further justified it by saying, I didn't come in here, blowing it off. I mean, I didn't think I'd be a good fit for a Twilight movie, but I was flattered they asked me, and we made the best movie we could. So he says all that stuff. It's like, even a guy like that who's got a rep and who was like, you guys, I don't know what you're talking about, Twilight. I'm not making Twilight movies, He had to say yes. Yeah. And I haven't seen the Twilight movies past the first one, but I could guarantee you the movie he made isn't good. But it is what it is. I couldn't turn that down. Could you,
No.
Michael? We want you to write no. I mean, I just try.
I think it's a matter of, there is that matter of, I'm going to whore myself out because then I can write my own ticket. Why not?
But
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a smart move.
Right. Some young foreign director gets asked if he wants to make, the Dark Tower or whatever. Of course. I mean, how do you say no to that?
Yep.
But
he really had, and it was weird. He had no, Nikolaj, what's his face, whatever I just said his name was. He, looking on his IMDb here, he doesn't have a lot of, he was the script writer for Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Okay.
But, he did not. Yeah, so that's not nothing, but in terms of direction, right. 2012 Royal Affair, which won some foreign, it was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Academy Awards and won like the Berlin Film Festival, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, he's just this Danish filmmaker.
He's just a guy. And his next movie, if it's a small movie that he's puts his heart into, could be great. So I don't want to totally disparage him. But
he hasn't done anything. He hasn't. The last thing on his list is Dark Tower. So it might be going back.
Well, it's always that. It seems like that's a common thing. I don't want to talk on this too long, but the fact that, like, I think about Alien Resurrection and what's his face, who was
he's a French superstar.
Beloved foreign film director, and they're like, oh, let's bring them in. But then, they expect this crazy, weird new vision for the franchise, and then they don't like it because it doesn't do as well. It's like, well, what, they're going to bring in a different aesthetic. You've got to understand that. And I think that's probably the same thing with this guy. Like, oh, he's this young up and comer, it just, it's a constant battle of, let's try something new, but can you do it the same?
Yeah.
Well, and also, there's so many, and we've talked about this in other shows of, there are so many people that get involved with notes and changes and tweaks and everything else. It's amazing that any film gets made and is coherent.
Anything but just coherent, since that's all a studio suit really knows how to pimp.
Even in my limited experience, it's that. It's like, it's like you're getting notes from 15 different places. It's like, can we just come together on something?
Right.
Number 9.
Right, well, real quick, Ryan, you didn't watch anything new because you've seen all these films, right? Yeah, I did finally I watched It Chapter 2. It was crap. I hated it.
Okay.
What did you watch?
It Chapter 2.
Oh.
And it
all it was cracked up to be, huh?
Oh yeah. I was just like, if I would have watched it without us talking about it last week, I might have been really angry about it, about how much.
Right. You were at least prepared, but it was like, somewhat.
Yep. Nope. There's nothing. Nope. So anyway, all right. So let's
enough more on it.
One more thing on that.
When I've seen it.
Yes.
3 of the 4 of us will be back to chat over that a little bit.
I think what Ryan said last week about how they took the best stuff and put in the second one or the first one, left the second with not as interesting a story, but then it's also like an hour longer than the first one. It's like you took the not as interesting stuff, dragged it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Terrible film.
All right. So that's just it. So that's our little recap of what we have revisited since last week. But now we're going to move on to our top 9 films of this Stephen King countdown. And that, of course, means that we have to hear about the countdown.
10 seconds. 9.
9.
8. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, and all right. So at number 9, we have man, I really love this movie. The Green Mile. Frank Darabont directing The Green Mile. Not a scary Stephen King movie, but more one of his more fantastical movies. So The Green Mile, love it. Anyone?
I considered this, but I've only seen it once in the theater. So of course, chunks of it here and there on cable, on AMC or whatever. But I really loved this film, but it's not something that has, kind of dug in and just stayed. So that's all I have to say. I did not vote for this. Yeah.
Did everyone else? Was this on all the three of us?
Everyone else did not vote for The Green Mile.
Okay.
Well, so if you want to say nice things about it, I invite you to do so now.
Okay.
Rob,
I dug I like the film. I like the when Stephen King dabbles into fantasy, or whether it be historical fantasy or like Eyes of the Dragon is my favorite Stephen King novel, and that's just all pure fantasy. I love it. So this
would that make a good movie, Eyes of the Dragon?
I don't think so. Now it's been a good 10 years since I've read it, probably. So I've been meaning to give it another read.
We just ordered it.
Yeah, I dig that. I read that book several times. I don't know that it would make a great movie, because I think it would just be derivative of
other fantasy
things that we have already seen.
Yeah, if you take the writing out of it, then what you're left with is the plot, the idea, the characters, whatever, some of his dialogue. But if it's a little too fantasy by rote, then it probably wouldn't make a very good movie. Hollywood would find a way to ruin it. Just curious.
But no, Green Mile, I dug the relationships, Michael Clarke Duncan at when he was at his most Michael Clarke Duncan-iest.
He was always best when he was playing a simpleton.
Yeah, and
his bad guys are notoriously stupid and terrible.
Yeah. But and it's Tom Hanks is Tom Hanks. He's really wonderful. It's got a great some really great supporting character work, some really, and ultimately this sad story. I mean, it's this fantastical story, but it's also really, really sad. And there's something about that just really kind of hit a chord. Rob, what do you think?
I really like the film. I actually like the film better than the books, and I read them as it came out. It came out as a serial.
Yeah, me too.
Like
a Dickens series, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It was modeling himself after
That's a neat idea.
Yeah, it was, and it was a fun way to read it. And I've listened to it since as well, and it's good. It's middle of the road for me of King, but it touches on a lot of the things that his writing really does well, is develop these characters, these inner lives of these characters, through relationships between the characters. And that's what I love about his writing is, I never find his books that scary. So I almost don't think of him as a horror writer, although obviously he's a horror writer. That's what he's famous for, the king of horror. But it's the characters and the fact that I don't want the books to end, that I want to know what's going to happen, what they're feeling, I relate to. And that's what's really strong in that movie, as well as the books. It's such a solidly made film. I think it looks beautiful. It captures the books perfectly. Because it's not my favorite book, it doesn't reach the 1, 2, 3, 4 slot, but it's just so well made, and the performances are so good throughout.
Yeah,
it is really
the guard that's bad.
It's really well performed. David
Morse.
And
now, did Duncan get an Oscar nomination for it, or am I not thinking of that right? Did Duncan get an Oscar nod for it?
I don't know. He should not have. It's a silly, cartoonish performance. It's a cliched magic Negro character too. It's almost offensive.
Yes, he was nominated.
That's
it was nominated for
if we'd
best...
have known who he was, and if this had been his 8th film instead of his 2nd, he would not have been. I guarantee you.
He was nominated, and it was up for screenplay, adapted screenplay, and it was up for best picture. And
Green Mile was up for best picture?
It was up for best picture, yeah.
I did not recall that. Interesting.
It won some, it won some critics awards and etc. Won some Saturn awards for science fiction. I really dig it. It's really emotional. Again, I echo what Rob said. It's the creation of these characters, and and obviously when you have Tom Hanks in something, it's that ineffable likability that Tom Hanks has, and he's playing a guard on death row. And so it's like you take, it's like your hero, your main guy.
That's what he is. He's just in charge of that wing of the prison, right? That's his crew,
and it's his job, and his job is to make it as boring and as nothing as possible, because boring is safe. You're on death row. Yeah,
he's a little too likable to the point of not being interesting in that film, but he's probably a good choice because he carries what the heart of that story is with him, and I think that works pretty good because the story's heart's in the right place. But I didn't like it the way you guys did. I saw it back then and thought it was fine, but was surprised by the Oscar nominations. And I saw it a couple months ago, and I was just that electrocution scene in it is outstanding. Mm-hmm. Everything else I just thought was totally twee and kind of like.
Is it a matter of
really melodramatic and kind
What's that, Michael?
Sorry, say again, Michael.
It didn't age well, Ryan. Like, so it's like it's 20 years old. So
because it's like what these guys are saying. It's so well made. David Morris is great in it. You just go down the list of
Sam Rockwell.
I just think that story is. Darabont just ran right into it and embraced all of it, and I think if you liked the story a lot when it came out, you probably liked that about it. But I just thought it needed. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's not well done, because it is. It's just something to ground that and make it matter a little more. The fantastic elements of that story, and because it's the next Frank Darabont movie and it's another prison movie, it suffers by comparison in almost every way that a film can to its sister movie, which I won't talk about now, but it has that shadow over it as well.
Well, it's interesting,
including Tom Hanks turning down the previous film I'm talking about, and then the very next chance he gets to do a movie with Darabont, he takes a role that's far less interesting and a much weirder picture.
The sister film I'm more in tune with as far as knowing things, but they get conflated in my head sometimes.
There's another comparison I'll make, but I shouldn't make that now too, because it's also a spoiler for later in our list. Yeah. This is a lot like something else that we had just seen these crew do, and it's just not anywhere near as good. And it suffers by that, and it's not that it hasn't aged well, but it still suffers from that. It still feels like something else, but not anywhere near as good, or anywhere near as real or believable or whatever. Right. But that's not fair. It is a fantasy, like Rob says. I have a tough time embracing the fantastical elements of Green Mile, and so it doesn't quite work for me.
And when you say it's twee, it definitely is, and I think that's like, you don't like that. I do like that. We talked about that when we were discussing the time travel thing. It's like, no, that's what I love about it, with a different film. But it is that, and when you talk about that the consequences aren't big enough or whatever, it's just like. But
my favorite scene was the execution that they showed on camera, and the way it not just the look at this is what it is. Like, that's very powerful. It's not just that, it's you spent time with those characters, like Joel says, and you get this round robin take, their reactions to it, and then you even get follow up in the story about it. These people who electrocution is their industry, essentially. You know what I mean? So it's got some cool moments in it. But that's Stephen King. I think Darabont lets that film down a little bit.
I think what it is that that it's missing for a lot of people, and that what maybe makes you go, Best Picture, what nomination, is that it is a really small. It's a really small idea, a really small, compact little story, and they made a really big movie out of it.
Yeah.
And so you feel like with all these stars and the length of this film, this should really have some deeper, larger, stakes or whatever. But isn't. It's just about these people in this time, in this place. And I think that works really well, but it hurts it in the general consensus as the film. I think it's like that's not what we're used to. It's like with all these superhero movies where Batman can't just fight the Riddler and fix something. The entire world has to be at stake in these things, and who can even imagine that? It's just
and saving the world gets a little old, but it hurt. Green Mile, still people really like it. It's number 9 here, so it's legit.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what
I'm honestly a little surprised that it was on the 20 at all, and not because I disliked it. I wouldn't have anticipated seeing this.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
No, I just wouldn't. To see it on the list.
This is the kind of movie by
Stephen
Stephen King, the kind of content that I would normally really love. So the fact that I didn't love it, it maybe makes it sort of disappointing because I was all about the non-horror Stephen King films at the top of my top 10. That's what was all up there for the most part. So this one to me feels like an also ran. It feels like a let's do all this again, a la what The Fury. I'll let Michael figure out what I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
Let's do the same thing again, but just not as good and scattered more emotionally. And
Well, let's move on to number 8, because that is also a Frank Darabont picture, The Mist.
That one I can get behind.
Yeah, 2007's The Mist.
The Mist is horrific.
I read the source material for the first time last year, and it was equally as unnerving as the movie was to me. And I am such a sucker for siege films. And, I love having and a lot of my scripts are a bunch of people with different personalities stuck in a place, and they got to kind of deal more. Yeah. And kind of the thread is more incidental to what is actually going on with their personality clashes. And such a good cast, great effects. And this movie.
And there's plenty of recognizable folks in it, but not an all-star cast.
No, not at all. But everyone's like, oh yeah, them. Like Damon, I think Darabont uses him in basically everything. But
since he started using him, he's been using him in everything.
Yeah, and this movie really deeply frightened me because apocalyptic stuff is generally my jam as far as what's going to get a rise out of me. So. I'm a big fan of The Mist, and I think that it was very lovely to the source material. Like, obviously, the ending is a little different,
but Stephen King loves that ending, and Darabont would basically told the studio, he goes, read the ending and read it a couple times, and just know that I'm not accepting any notes that say I have to change that ending or alter it or anything. He said before he started shooting, which was really smart. This is it. I'm not making it without this. And everybody was like, okay, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He was dealing with Dimension and the Weinsteins and not Sony or Warner Brothers. So they agreed, but he was wise to do that because that's a studio that messes about with films.
Yeah.
He's like, I will keep it under 2 hours without credits, and I'm not changing my ending. Then you've got me. I think it's super cool that a artist took a stand like that and won, and we all benefited because we got that movie.
It's a rough ending. Like
it's brutal. Yeah.
Man, it's like I'm seeing the film multiple times, but every time you're still like, geez Louise, this is just. Yeah, it's a really well-made film. Although what did I watch? I've heard great things about the black and white version, which I have not seen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Rob can talk to that. Rob
Yeah.
actually specified, quote, the director's cut, which
Yep.
they're the same cut, so he can
Yeah.
only mean the black and white version.
Yep. That's how it's labeled on the DVD I used to have. And
But
now
it's
I
the
have
same movie, just in black and white.
Right.
For me, that's the way to watch it. It feels
It's a
like
real. I mean, for a film that was shot in
50s
color,
sci-fi horror
for a
movie.
film that was shot in color, it's a real re-engineering of the way the film looks too. It's not just they didn't shoot it in black and white, so you can't go back and
Right.
light it that way or anything. But there are things you can do in post to make it feel more like a 50s horror film, which is what they did, with shadows, with contrast, and anyone who's a fan of The Mist, it's another way of watching The Mist, so I recommend it.
Right. And
But
it's Darabont's
I'll just
preferred
say real quick before
way.
you go on, Darabont says the color version is like a cheap 70s horror film, and the black and white's like an old 50s version. I prefer the cheap 70s version myself. I think that's what's on screen, so that fits that style better.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean that's what I was going to say is it's Darabont's, I think, preferred version. That's why they label a director's cut, even though there's no cutting made or additions made. The thing I really like about the film is like you say, that a bunch of people in the bottle, and you get Jeffrey DeMoon and Francis Sternhagen, who have both been in multiple Stephen King things, and they're fabulous supporting.
Sternhagen in The Mist. I love her.
Yeah, I mean she's great in Misery as well, and she actually reads the audiobook for Dolores Claiborne, and she's fantastic.
I'll bet.
As a reader in that. So I'd love to see these guys pop up in all of these films.
Well, William Sadler and Alexander Holden and
Marcia Gay Harden.
Marcia Gay
Harden.
Yeah.
But and even the newbies like Thomas Jane and Alexa Davalos is great in it, and it's a huge ensemble film. Andre Braugher is great in it.
I think the scene stealer. Why can't I think of her name? But Carol from The Walking Dead has 2-second scene, and she steals the film as far as acting.
It's a star-making performance. It's why she got the role in Walking Dead.
Walking Dead,
and
for sure.
In
Melissa
Walking
McBride.
Dead, she's a household name.
Think of her
Melissa
name,
McBride. Nope, nobody here will walk a lady home. It's a stunning moment, man.
But I also love
and that look on her face later in the film is also rather priceless.
But what I love about this, because just this year is when I finally really took a deep dive into Lovecraft, and I read 20 of his short stories. So kind of knowing now, looking back on The Mist, that this was kind of King's kind of pseudo take on Lovecraft. Is it kind of gives it extra joy.
Well, and
because
it's one of the best,
hopeless, man.
It's one of the best adaptations of Lovecraft out there, if not the best, even though it isn't a direct adaptation.
Yeah.
But it just gets everything right. The existential dread of it, like you said, the siege mentality of it, that idea that you kind of know what happened, but you really have no idea why any of this is happening. Gets that perfect balance right. And that great Stephen King thing added to it that's I don't think is really in a lot of Lovecraft. It because he's kind of philosophical and it kind of misses this. But King from The Stand and certainly from The Mist, there's this genuinely good person, Sternhagen's character, the biker guy. There are these people who are rising to the occasion and doing everything possible to be human in this situation. And then there's Marcia Gay Harden's character and others who we're literally waiting for the apocalypse to come just so they could be needed to be the worst possible people on the planet.
Right.
Stephen, whenever he's got a big existential crisis, there's always a character who they've been waiting for this day. They've been waiting for this day. And now they're in their element. Now they can really be the evil person that they've sort of been trying not to be their whole lives.
But there's nothing in current world affairs that mirrors that either. So anyway,
just watching it in black and white, watch it in color, the CGI creatures, all of it. It's
a terrifying
all
movie.
really works
I mean,
And
I think one of the best sequences is the let's tie the rope around and go out. It's like, I mean, it's that sense of, horror is the sense of the unknown, the fear of the unknown.
Right.
But this takes this to some other beyond level of unknown because you really are clueless. There is nothing here even from our dimension. So what are we going to do?
Right.
And all the things we do that make certain amounts of sense sort of blow up in our faces. It's and the worst imaginable things happen to the best people.
Yep.
And you still are engaged in the fight for it, the fight for life, whatever it is. You're still towed along by that story. I think The Mist is a near masterpiece, actually.
Well, I think the thing with The Mist, and maybe I'm wrong, it's probably been a good year or two since I've seen it, but I feel like, in horror films, people make poor choices so that, the audience can scream at the screen. I don't recall anything other than Marcia Gay Harden's character where you're like, okay, you're just batshit. But the fact that you look at these people and the choices they're making, I'm like, okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah, but some of them turn out horrifically wrong-headed.
Oh, of course, but it's like,
you're right. The difference is it's not a setup with a punchline in the film. Them thinking these creatures will be repelled by fire and taking hairspray and shooting it at them seemed like that's what do they have? That's the weapon they have.
Yep.
That's a horrible idea. The whole the shining the flashlights in the parking lot. You're just like, what are you doing? Stop.
But this is something that speaks to kind of one of my theories in my own writing, and something that I look at in horror when I look for this is like, I don't like the characters to make easy choices. It's like, if they make the choice that is reasonable to the audience and it still fails, like you said, Ryan, then you have won me over as a writer.
Right.
If they do something stupid because that's what you need to pull the plot forward, then you're an idiot. But these people did what they were supposed to do based on what the audience expectations are, and it still failed.
They're doing the best they can in unthinkable circumstances.
That's good writing to me.
Joel, this was on your list too. You got anything to add?
The Mist? I mean, no. I mean, the Mist. The ending of the film alone puts it on the list for me.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I liked it. It was. I mean, for all the exact reasons you guys are saying. I mean, it does. It has these. It has this logical. These moments of logic that just don't work out. But it's to me, it's that ending. The ending. We've talked about that ending on another show, and it's a kick in the gut. It's
slap in the face.
Well,
the
bonus of that ending is that James sells it. I don't particularly love him as an actor.
I was gonna mention that. I was gonna mention that too. He's really, really tremendous. In those
he's a great
final moments,
sort of faceless leading man for the whole film too, and the kid is good, and like I said,
and the
Laurie
choice
Holden's really good in her moment.
The choice by Darabont to show the ending in the way that he did, it's respectful.
Yeah,
but it's also, I think, it makes it even more dreadful, because you hear, you see something, but it's really smartly done to tell you exactly how.
There is one thing I would change about it, but I won't say that because it sort of spoils it.
Okay,
we've done a good job to praise it without totally.
We'll praise it. We'll get that. Hopefully, we'll remember to get that from you after we hit stop on the.
Let me
show.
know if you're still curious.
I will say it's
otherwise. I agree. It is nearly perfect.
It's one of those things also where you look at it and where the end of the movie happens. That character's horror is just beginning.
Yeah. It's similar to Pet Cemetery in a way.
Needed you coming in with a voiceover, or even better, it could pan over to you and you could just be standing there on the side of the highway smoking a pipe. The horror is just beginning.
It's just beginning. Oh my God. Like the dude from Rocky Horror, the narrator from Rocky Horror. Yeah. Wow.
I'm sorry, Rob. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say it's the ending reminds me of parts of Pet Cemetery, and that it's just, as a viewer, it creates a whole question for you to think about and just
And
just,
Frank Darabont, who I was just
God.
dissing on for Green Mile, he gets all the credit for it. Steven gives him all the credit. That's a friendship and a relationship that I'm no doubt will endure
Yeah.
because of that. Like that's a collaboration. It's very unusual for an author to say, yeah, sure, completely change my ending, and I'll even go out and get behind it for you in case any of my fans get too upset.
But I mean, from what I recall of the novella, it's like the ending's not that dire, but it's certainly not hopeful from what I remember. It's like it's just kind of a blank slate, right? It's just
it's a blank slate. That giant thing steps over their car. It's a hopeless ending, but it doesn't scream hopelessness quite the personal hopelessness quite the way Darabont's edition does.
All right, so let's move on to number 7 on our list. Another really good film, as they all are at this point. This one directed by Taylor Hackford, Dolores Claiborne.
Woo!
Yeah.
What does that look, Michael?
Is this on my list? I don't think
no,
this is
it was
on my
not
list.
on your list. You forgot about it.
No, I didn't forget about it. It just didn't.
Well, then
I just read the book for the
hell,
first time. No, I read the book the first time last year, and the book was mesmerizingly terrifying and wonderful. I don't think I've seen the film more than once. Like but it never grabbed me, never dug in and said, you got to sit here on this for a while. So I enjoyed it, and Kathy Bates is amazing, but that's all I'll say.
This is one to revisit, Michael.
Yeah.
I watched it in preparation again. I didn't think it was going to be in my top 20, and it ended up making it because when I watched it again,
all
top
three
10,
have this in the top
10, or it wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. This is another 7. Surprise.
And it was high in your top 10, and it was high in mine, or it wouldn't be here either, because these two guys didn't vote for it. Or did you, Michael? No, Joel's never seen it.
No, I've never seen it.
Oh,
unbelievable.
I mean, I remembered it. I remember that's kind of a good one. It's a different one for him. There's not really a supernatural element at all.
No, but it's still
it's a solidly made movie.
Horror elements, horrific elements.
Yep.
It's a murder mystery where the audience it's really a double murder mystery where the audience already knows the outcome of both of them.
Yeah.
So it really is this is probably why Rob likes it. Certainly why I like it. It's a purely character-driven film. It really is what's at stake for these characters personally, what's behind their actions and their motives. What are they hiding? What are they choosing to share? What's getting lost interpretation between people? All of that is crucial to the story. And Hackford, who I always want to do a little play on words with Hackford's name, Mr. Helen Mirren. That Hack part of his name is apropos a lot of times, but what he cares about in his best films, in White Knights, in Proof of Life, is what things mean to these people in Officer and a Gentleman. This is his best movie, I think. I think it's not even close, actually. It just really, really well done. It's got all that great foggy, rainy New England atmosphere. It's got Kathy Bates, as you say, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Pretty much working at their highest levels of their careers.
Yep.
Kathy
Who's
Bates,
the husband?
obviously.
Is it Strathairn?
Yes.
Strathairn, yeah.
Sure. Amongst others, it's packed to the rafters with really good
Christopher
performances.
Plummer and John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly. Bob Gutman returns. Eric Bogosian.
Who's the other? Who's the older woman that she takes care of? She's fantastic.
She's very familiar, but I can't.
She's a theater actor that Helen Mirren recommended Hackford cast. So she's not in a lot of stuff.
Is that Judy Parfitt?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's outstanding in it. So we have Helen.
She's the one that she's caring for, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she's just her maid for a while, but she ends up caring for her exactly, and maybe possibly murdering her. Who knows?
I'm kind of surprised since I read the book for the first time last year. I'm like, why did I not? Because usually it's like, okay, let's go back and revisit the film now. I'm really surprised that I don't have that in my pocket. I'm like, why didn't I? Maybe I didn't want to mess with it because the book was really fantastic.
If you're coming off of Misery, it suffers a little bit, I think, about why I didn't like Green Mile very much. You're coming off of Misery, you're coming off a gangbusters, go for the throat film, and this isn't that. This is quietly needles you and pokes you in your heart and in your
slowly
gut.
reveals.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a different kind of movie, and that might have suffered from that, but it wasn't a huge hit when it came out. It was an okay one.
It suffered from that when it was released, but on a later viewing, particularly if you saw it years ago, you sort of know what to expect. Then you fall into it, and I was really surprised at how just absorbed I got into it. And it's great with the eclipse and how it handles that. And having just watched Gerald's Game again, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot the eclipse plays a.
It does have. It
Yep.
does have a supernatural element hanging over it. I don't want to say that because there's nothing supernatural in it, but it does have that mysterious miracles of nature, of weather, of psychology. It is very much still a Stephen King thing that gives you a lot to think about when you're watching it and afterwards. And just another shout out to Jennifer Jason Leigh, who again is another actor I'm not a huge fan of throughout the years. She's really, really good. This is the role she was meant to play. It fits her personality perfectly. She has a monologue at the end of the film, and I won't say what the context is because it kind of ruins it, but
it's hilarious though, I bet.
It is really
given the movie, I'm guessing
it will have your gut a busting.
It's King's best slapstick comedy, I think.
Sure,
for sure.
Among a lot of them. I mean, that's what he's known for, right? I'm going to revisit this. I mean, I definitely want to put it on my list because, I'm intrigued to go back and look at it.
Good stuff. Make sure you're watching it in scope and in the best quality possible. That'll make a difference.
Yep.
All right.
It's a beautiful film. So hats off to Taylor and everybody involved.
I sold jars to Taylor Hackford once, just so you know.
Jars?
Jars of what?
Just empty jars. He was doing something. I don't know.
I thought it was going to be one of those got urine.
He was preserving peaches or something.
Yeah, he was making some jam.
I think he was canning. And I mean, it wasn't until after he left, I'm like, shit, I think that was Taylor Hackford.
That's why one buys empty jars. I mean, I can't think of any other reason that's not really horrific.
He's like,
I didn't mean to diss on Taylor. You look at his movies, he's only got one bad movie. It's just they all have reputations outsized, I think, for what their cinematic accomplishments are. So I'm always a little hard on him, but this is perfect. This requires a director to be patient, to let the quiet moments breathe, to connect all the dots. Like everything he does in it is really, really perfect. So I really do appreciate
and it's beautifully photographed.
Of course.
It's a gorgeous looking film. It gets island life just right, I think.
Only one ugly movie on our top 9, and it's appropriately ugly. So they're all pretty.
Yep. Number 6 is the movie that started it all. It is Carrie. I'm terribly sorry. I'm sorry. I should just
speaking of ugly movies.
I assume we're not talking about the remake of Carrie. That was never.
Wait, we're not talking about the remake of Carrie?
Which one? There's a TV movie one.
There's a TV movie.
The 2013. No. Anyway, let's go. We're going back to 1976. Brian De Palma's Carrie. Creepy Carrie.
Okay,
Carrie.
I've been waiting a week to bring this.
It was number 20.
And I'm a little shocked because I think this was number 3 on my list, if I recall. And the
number
fact
20
that,
on Rob's.
that's the point I wanted to make. That is just, Rob, mind blowing to me. When you said that last week, I think my head was going to explode. So I as far as the remake, I shut it off after 20 minutes. It was crap. I didn't watch the rest of it. I never will. It was awful. But this original film, I mean, it's the original bullied child gets revenge story, and it could not be done any better. We talked about Christine, of course, but I I'm still blown away by the fact that both Spacek and Piper Laurie had Oscar nominations for this horror film. I think that's just...
They made an impression on the populace at that time in '76. I mean,
but
I'm not surprised by that.
De Palma's so quirky, and I know a lot of people dislike his split screen, but I adore that effect.
I've got no problems with the split screen.
If you've seen Sisters, you know how effective that use can be. But I adore Carrie, and I'm really surprised it wasn't a little higher. So I blame all of you for that. Number 6, at least top 5. I mean, come on.
It's actually tied with another movie, a big tie, and the other little movie that could beat it because it was on more lists, because it technically wasn't on Rob's list. But I had it. I just looked at the list to see where I had it, because I am going to go after Carrie a little bit here, but I had it as 5 on my list. So obviously I appreciated it as well.
All right.
Everything that happens.
Let's turn the floor over to Rob here. And let's let him.
Please explain yourself.
Okay. I became aware of this movie pretty young. Paperback edition of the book with Carrie on the cover, all covered in blood. And
the picture from the movie, right? The movie-related novel issue.
Yeah.
Yep.
Blood's an issue for me, particularly when I was younger.
Even pig's blood? Spoiler alert.
Well, I didn't know it was pig's blood at the time. So I did not see Carrie until I was in college, probably.
It makes a difference.
Because I thought that movie is way too scary for me. It's going to be gross, gory, which I don't generally like that much. I can certainly handle it now as an adult. You know, now I'm in my 40s. In my 30s, not so much.
But the idea of that turned you away from it repeatedly throughout the years.
Yeah. So when I revisited it, when I first saw it in college, and probably at that time it was still on VHS, and you don't get the cinematic value of it as well, as you will.
It's roughly the shape of a modern TV, so I actually thought throughout the years it played better on video than some.
Probably, yeah.
But it's still, there's a lot lost visually when you put it on television, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's
but it's not a big widescreen film like Dolores Claiborne is, or like Christine
even.
Or Firestarter.
Right. Yeah. But it I don't know, it just always had this hit against it for me. Obviously, as I rewatched it again before the list, and it beat out Christine for me just because of its iconicness and the fact that I begrudgingly have grown to appreciate it and enjoy it. It's not anywhere near my favorite Stephen King novel. It made the list. That's all I can say. It had a hit against.
Yeah, but Castle Rock, 1408, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, The Outsider, Hearts in Atlantis, 11/22/63, Mr. Mercedes, all of those beat Carrie for you.
Yep. And it's a personal, like, I was turned off by it at probably age 6 or 7, just frightened by it, thinking that I can never watch that. That's too scary for me. That's whatever. When I watch it, it's not too scary for me, but.
Well, I read the novel for the first time last year, as getting some Stephen King in. I had to stop after 30 pages because it upset me so immensely.
What happens in the first 30 pages? I mean,
well, it's the rocks, which if you've read the book, you know about the rocks, which is not in. Well, it is in the film, but
it looms over the film without being exactly in it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think looking back, and we've had this discussion several times about, I'm becoming more sensitive in my old age, and there's something. As much as I've gotten over my own personal bullying in high school, which was pretty severe at times, and so there's something, of course, heartbreaking about her situation. There is that sense of loveliness for what becomes of her tormentors, but this
but it's so. Michael, I just got to stop you there. The reason I don't like Carrie is because I don't get off on watching other people get eviscerated, even if they're bad people. There's the whole ending of Carrie, if it works at all, it works because it's tragic. She wipes out everybody, whether they're deserving or not.
Absolutely. And that's what I think is why the film is so well layered, because you get the satisfaction of Nancy Allen's character, biting the whatever, but there's that weird kind of throwaway split screen of Betty Buckley's character getting killed, which even as a child seeing this film, I'm like, that is effed up. She's your friend.
That's what's horrifying
that's exactly, that's what's so tragic about it. Carrie can't see past anything now. They've broken her, and I think that's something that speaks to people that have been bullied. It's like there's nothing left for me here to not think that everyone's out to get me because I've been so beaten down. And that's what I think is the magic of the film, because I do get pleasure out of what happens to specifically PJ Soul's character. She's
almost worse than a bully. She's an enabler of a bully, and that's what makes bullies work.
But I think the other
that plays in the film really, really well.
Yeah, the other thing good about Carrie, though, is you have characters like Sue Snell, the Amy Irving character, and William Cott. So there is this, I think it's almost more painful that she gets to see a nice side of other people and, kind of come out of her shell a little bit, only to be destroyed. And I'm getting really emotional. This movie,
and by her
it was a horror film
well.
as a child. It was a horror film. I'm like, okay, cool, this is crazy, and batshit Margaret White. But it is so beyond that for me now. Like it's so awful what she goes through. I can't even fully take it in what she has to go through, and so I think that's why I take a little extra pleasure in the pain of these other characters. I'm like, you brought this on yourself in so many ways. This movie, it's. I think that's the interesting progression for me in understanding this film, and certainly the book, reading it last year, added to that. But this is not a horror film anymore. It is highly emotional, and every time it just destroys me in every way. I love this film.
I got to say that's probably why it was low on my list, is because I was a bully, and I did not appreciate getting my car turned over. I didn't like the idea that my victims would see this movie and think that they would have a chance.
Yeah,
I really had issues with that.
I think
to have a chance
Michael
with the
taps into
hero.
what the story is. It's not just it's the horrible mix of things. King really, again, what we have here is we have because of King. He lays it out. I don't give a lot of credit to De Palma, even though you get a ton of direction for your movie dollar. I feel like he misses any sort of reality or emotional thing for me. But the idea of what I'm sorry, Mom does not resemble anybody that's ever existed in the real world. 42-year-old Sissy Spacek having her first period is ridiculous.
But those are in the book, though. You're blaming De Palma for this. That's in the book. Those characters are there.
Yes,
and I think they do exist.
Yes, but De Palma is not a human enough director that he finds the cinematic balance or that he makes any of it his own. He just grabs them and lets them exist in that Stephen King way on screen, it's tough.
I got to disagree, Ryan. I mean, you get the Betty Buckley character, the sympathetic gym teacher. You also get a little bit of reality when you can see her get irritated with Carrie, even on her level.
Betty Buckley's pretty great in it.
She's so phenomenal in that movie.
I agree.
And there is that humanity, and again, with the Sue Snell and the William Cott character, Tommy, there is real humanity there. And you see a change in how they look at things.
William Cott especially reminds me of people I went to high school with myself.
I believe there are people like Margaret White out there, and that's what's terrifying. I don't think that's, it's obviously a little overplayed, but,
I don't know how else you can do it. I don't think Piper did a bad job.
No.
I'm just saying, as a whole, the thing doesn't thematically it's strong because of what you're talking about. It's all presented in this heightened gonzo sort of visual way, and the film carries you away and you're sort of riveted by it the whole time. That's why it's on my list. De Palma's. I never thought he was a good human director, and I think Carrie shows that.
I can't speak to his other films, but as far as this one, I think the most human and most touching, beautiful moment is that ridiculous spinning around opposite as they're spinning this way, but the look on Spacek's face that she provides and that De Palma captures is amazing. It is so. That's the moment that breaks my heart because you know what is about to happen,
and it's purely cinematic. Nobody's talking. It's all emotion. It's really amazing.
It is, but I'm saying he captured he captured it beautifully.
It's a showy, theatrical, like filmmaker trick, and it still works. So that movie was on layoff for a long time while they were waiting to shoot it, and all De Palma did with his time was set up these sort of amazing camera shots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He just. A lot of filmmakers do this today too. They storyboard the whole thing, but in '76, that's not really how you made movies because you didn't have a lot of effects to deal with and things. You didn't have to do that, and it took a lot of the spontaneity away from it. He planned out every little thing, and even the simplest thing in the film is shot sort of elaborately. Right. So it's fun to watch from a filmmaking perspective. But I love Carrie.
That's a technique he's obviously a huge Hitchcock fan, and Hitchcock famously storyboarded everything. Right. He hated shooting the movies because he'd already done it in his head. Right.
It was only diminished when he finally got it done than when he shot it.
Right.
I want to share something real quick. So that same horror 80s program I talked about last week, there was a sequence talking about Carrie, and they interviewed Stephen King. And apparently he went to an all African-American theater in some city, and it was, so he went to get the reaction to see Carrie. And so he sat behind people and just listened to reactions to the film. So apparently in the very end, which of course that fantastic, Amy Irving sequence and everything in the background's moving in reverse, it's so bizarre. Yeah. So when they, one of the best jump scares ever, I think, so he said that the guys in front of him were holding each other through the whole film because they were so terrified. And then as soon as that happens, Amy Irving then wakes up and Priscilla Pointer is holding her and everything. I guess the two guys in front of King said, "That's it. That's it. She ain't never going to be right."
No, she ain't.
No.
I'm so passionate. I'm sorry. I can't believe this is not top 5. Mind is blown.
No, it almost it was 6 and it was tied with 5.
Yeah, so it's technically top 5 in the sense that it is tied with our next movie. Let's move on. Our next movie, also of that era. All right, here we go. Let me do it here.
Oh Lord.
The Dead Zone. That's my Christopher Walken. It's not good. It's not a good Christopher Walken, but it's my Christopher Walken.
But you know who it was. You know who it was.
Yeah, it can't be that bad.
Let me quickly say something and I'll step aside. Never read the book, never seen the film. On.
Wow.
Well, it's David Cronenberg movie.
Yes, it is, but I have not seen it.
So so the filmmaking again is really, really strong, and it's really strong. Like it should be on your list. For sure, of things to see.
I'll just say this: Elwood read the book recently, and then he went and watched the film on his own because I'm like, I don't want to know anything, and he's like, he didn't care for the film. That's what But he had just read the book, so
I'll tell you, it's weird. That movie's not for everybody, and really, all Cronenberg movies, like they're not crowd pleasers.
No.
You know what I mean? They're not. They're not crowd
normal.
pleasers. Like it's not a crowd pleaser like Carrie is. Even if you're horrified beyond words by what you just saw in Carrie, like you still leave the movie going, "Wow!" Yeah. You can't help but feel that way because it's crazy and it's exhilarating, even if it's horrible. This movie's not like that at all. It's way more contemplative and it's really odd. It has Walken's character goes through something that's of an unreliable narrator in the film, even though the film's not exactly completely from his point of view. It's a complicated movie. That's why I like it. That's why even though Carrie's fun to watch every once in a while, I voted for this higher. I voted for it highest, in fact, of any of us. Rob came in and helped get it on the list. this high, and Joel helped break the tie because he had it on his list too, even if though it wasn't in his top 10. Yeah, that's right.
You're
That's how
welcome.
it worked. That's how it worked out.
You know, I gotta go ahead, Brian.
It's I just think it's an amazingly complicated story, and because it's so weird, the human element of it shines a little brighter, I think. What his ex fiance is going through, just all of that stuff. You throw a weird thing at a group of people, and then the film tries desperately to deal with those crazy things in a legit way. Not to mention that there's a very creepy sort of serial killer story going on in the background, and a very ominous sort of, the whole future is sort of threatened by this thing that's happening. There's all this other existential stuff that's working on this character, and I dug it for that. Plus, just Cronenberg and his visuals. There's nothing super gross in it, so it's not like Videodrome or something where you're just like,
Body
remember
horror.
that thing when that guy's head exploded? You know, there's nothing like that in the movie. But I dig it. Again, I like the snowy, wintry New England atmosphere of the whole thing. I think that's super cool. So, Rob, what do you think?
Well, first of all, it's probably in my top 5 Stephen King novels. And I can understand your husband's reaction, Michael, because as much as I like the movie, and I had it as number 5.
Same with me. We both had it as 5.
The book is so much better. And it's not that it does anything different, it just does more. It's, you know, and that's what makes it such a great book, is you really identify with Johnny. And I would say read the book, wait 2 years, and watch the film, because the film will play much better. You'll fill in the gaps with your memory of the book, but you won't be comparing it directly.
I think you should watch the film right away and then read the book anytime after.
You could do
That's
that.
how I would experience it if I were you.
Well, I mean, the big selling point, of course,
because then the book won't let the movie down for you, but you'll still get to have them both.
But
I would guess
so
the movie will encourage you to read the book like it did a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But I'm a Cronenberg fan, so that's always been the draw for me. And of course I've seen sequences, I think, in that exact same horror thing I saw in the 80s, like chunks of this. I'm like, I don't know what this is, you know? But yeah, that would be my big selling point, is Cronenberg, because I'm not necessarily a Walken fan. So,
well, it's a big shout out to Walken, because he is an odd duck, and he, even as a young man, he was, but he's playing a fairly straight leading man in the film. He's not playing him straight because he's Christopher Walken, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you get from him, because there are not a lot of Christopher Walken portrayals where he just is this everyman like this guy is, and it's such a neat thing to see him do. It's part of what's cool about the movie. It sort of exists on its own in that way. There aren't a lot of other examples of that.
And what's great about his performance is he's, like you say, he's playing a normal guy. The Christopher Walken-iness about him that just naturally is him, that plays well into what's happened to him.
It makes him a specific person, and it's just neat. It's a neat thing, I think.
Yeah, he's really good in it. The film, it's really, really good.
It's a really small budget film, so it's
very modest, small.
So keep that in mind. It's a very
it's episodic, which the book is sort of like that too.
Right. Weeks go by in between scenes, things like that.
You can see why it became a TV series, which I've never seen. I've never seen
Anthony Michael Hall, right?
I've seen bits of it. Yeah, Anthony Michael Hall and Nicole DeBoer. It's not bad.
Well, all I know of the Dead Zone, other than a couple little things, but is when they did it on American Dad. If you guys watched that show, when Roger the alien gets the gift and he touches people. So I understand. I know the concept.
Yeah, I think Saturday Night Live also did a takeoff when Walken hosted once, and it was like if he touched somebody, he would be able to tell them what they were going to have for dinner.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, something like that. And people are like, "Great,
okay,
thanks.
I've got something to tell you."
I've got something to tell you. Anyway, all right. So that's
and we didn't even mention Martin Sheen.
He's the president,
Martin
right?
Sheen. Yeah, he's the president. It's the West Wing.
Hope to God he won't be the president.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's
Oh, I do know a little. Okay, I know. Yeah.
In the book, he's a much bigger character too.
Mm.
So
I think a little of him goes a long way. I think the movie got that balance right.
well, for the movie, yeah. The movie, what you got what you need. In the book, it plays very well. It's almost like a parallel story of those two characters.
So that'll be
I can see how that would be neat.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, Michael, after you see this, to see how much higher than Carrie you put the Dead Zone. So
I don't think it's feasible. I don't care how good it is.
No, I don't think so either. But I think you're even though it's not as a gonzo a film, I think your experience might be something like you had with Christine. Maybe. Maybe not.
Yep. All right. So
it's a weird film. It's weird.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Well, it's Cronenberg.
It's Cronenberg adapting a really odd mishmash of stuff that Stephen King put into his book. The two are perfect for each other, but it's still odd. It's not a, it's perfectly legit for me to love it and to understand how the other half might not just not like it. Although if he read it and then watched it, I'm not sure how he couldn't have not liked it a little bit. Why even bother watching it if you didn't like it?
No, I completely understand. If you really like the book, it really bugs you sometimes. Like, I used to hate the movie To Kill a Mockingbird because it's one of my favorite books.
Wow.
It's just so great, and the movie just, now I can watch the movie and enjoy it and really think it's a great movie. But right away, after I watched it, after reading it the first time, I'm like, no, this sucks. This doesn't speak to me the way the novel did.
There's that great scene at the end of Capote where he leaves the screening of To Kill a Mockingbird early, and he's out in the lobby drinking a cocktail, getting drunk, and he just kind of goes, I don't see what the big deal is.
Okay, so next up is our number 4 film in the Stephen King extravaganza. This is one of the single great epic performances in movies.
Can I guess? Is it Dreamcatcher?
It is. Sadly, you're wrong. It, of course, is Silver Bullet.
Oh,
no, of course
you
it's
made that up. Okay.
It is.
Dreamcatcher was funny. Silver Bullet was mean because Silver Bullet's actually pretty good.
Yeah, but what the Everett McGill performance?
The role of the wolf.
I'm just saying.
No, it is. It of course is Misery.
Yay! I had this. This was high on my list. I don't remember where.
High on everybody's list. Here it is at number 4.
Yeah. I mean,
these next 4 were high on everybody's list.
Yeah,
we're beyond the ones that were.
There's actually quite a gap between
Dead Zone,
Carrie and the Dead Zone, and then we get to Misery, and those. Yeah, there's quite a gap. So these next movies,
these next 4 are all very close to each other, but they're separated from the rest.
So we have Misery, of course, directed by Rob Reiner. Starring
bad director.
Hack.
Never done anything.
I stand by that.
I know you do. I disagree.
James Caan and of course Kathy Bates in just one of the iconic roles ever to be put on celluloid. So good.
And pretty much introduction to the nation too. So that helps. It always helps. Whenever you can just show up and no one's seen you before and suddenly you're this thing. It's like Michael Clark Duncan we talked about. It's same with him. He is that thing on screen. You don't know him from anything else. So you're, Ben Kingsley is Gandhi. Oh my God, he is Gandhi. Like you don't know him otherwise.
Yeah.
Eventually you get to know them and you're like, oh, okay, that's how, you know what I mean? You get to know their tricks and their stuff, and that doesn't make them a bad actor, but what a way to just show up to take stage. And what an amazing, every leading man in Hollywood turned this thing down.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Nobody was willing to be emancipated the way Caan allows himself to be for the story.
William Hurt twice turned it down.
And he'd have been great in it.
Yeah. Kevin Kline, Michael Douglas, Harrison Ford, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Richard Dreyfuss, Gene Hackman, and Robert Redford. Warren Beatty was set to do it. and was working on them to make him a less passive character, a less emasculated character. But then Dick Tracy, post-production and Dick Tracy got extended. So then he dropped out, and that's how it eventually got to James Caan.
That's the big unsung hero of this film, is Caan's performance.
I agree.
He's the straight man, but you know, there's some places that he has to go in his head as the character that could not have been easy. And I think that, you know, he deserves a lot more credit than is given, you know.
And Caan is a character that wears his huge ego on his sleeve in everything he's been in his career, and he has to suppress some of that. He has to really suppress all of that for this film. Even this guy, when he's not being tortured or this or that, it's not a guy that you think of as James Caan. It's an actorly performance where he's really got to be something different than he's ever been. I get that he's just a regular Joe, so we take for granted that should be easy, but for guys like Christopher Walken and James Caan, just being an everyday man is an easy thing to pull off.
Sure.
And he does it even better than Walken. He really does it to a fault. He's us. We feel everything he feels. He takes us through the whole thing by the hand, and I agree, it's where the movie happens. Bates is spectacular in it. Without her, who knows what it would even be, but it's Caan that does the work of the movie.
The levels that Bates brings to it, the mood swings are so frightening and realistic. It's like, there's always that sense of I don't know what she's going to walk in next. I mean, that's the beauty of the film, is like, what mood is she going to be in when she comes in again? I don't.
Yeah, what Annie is going to come through the door, and that's you know, that's a great part of the. I mean, what I remember of the book. I mean, yeah, you sort of you get that feeling from the book, and for Bates to be able to capture it, and even at her worst moments, as an audience, you still sort of, not like her isn't the right word, but you at least sort of understand her madness, I guess, or mania. If that, I mean, is that I'm not finding the right word.
It's fair to say that I think she's one of Stevens, and I don't read a lot of his stuff, but knowing all these movies, I think she's one of Stevens' greatest psychos, because if not the greatest by far, because I don't sympathize her. The more you start to find out the nurse who killed all the children and how the hospital is just like, let's not acknowledge that this really happened. Let's just get rid of her. That idea that let's take this thing and just make it somebody else's problem. That's part of why any of this is even happening. Right. I find that, like, psychologically and institutionally horrific. I love it, but
but that's kind of, and I guess that's sort of what I'm meaning is you recognize the horribleness of this person, but there's something in Bates's portrayal where you're just still like, more. Yes.
Yeah, right.
You know,
she's let your crazy time with.
Let your crazy wash over me, because it's so.
Well, I mean, just the choice of her language, you know, you cock-a-doodle. I mean, this woman is. I think I agree with you, Joel. There's something so bonkers about the character and Bates's performance. It is kind of a glutton for punishment. It's like, oh my God. Well, there is that danger and that fear of what, like you said, what Annie's going to walk through the door, but I hope it's the crazy one. You know, I mean, they all are, but I wanted to point out that I also read the book, I think like a year or two ago for the first time. And of course, we know the big difference in a later sequence. I won't spoil that, but and again, this calls back to my sensitivity in old age and knowing the film very well before I read the book. I was at points crying in the book because it upset me so deeply. And certainly the sequence I talked about, I almost couldn't read it. I'm like, I can't get it. And I think that's one of the strengths of King. It's like his descriptions are just, they're mind-boggling. But I really adore this film, and I'm glad that I think that it is pretty true to the book. You know, I mean, obviously that big sequence separated.
Yeah, and there's a reason why that sequence was specifically, I think, was specifically singled out,
because it is this big moment in the movie, or in the story. It's this big moment, and it really is one of the. It's the biggest departure from the from.
But I get it. But I mean, I don't think the hobbling is any worse necessarily. Like it's still just, they capture that one shot of the first foot, and it's like, it's.
Yeah, that was a Rob Reiner decision. He thought that would, if the book's version of what happens to Paul
Sheldon,
what happens to Paul, he said we would lose the audience. We'd lose the audience for the rest of the film.
He may be right.
Yeah,
I agree, but I think it goes back to what you said, Joel, that we would also lose that sort of joyful playfulness of the of Annie Wilkes, because if she went, not that she hasn't gone to these horrible extremes, but I think you're right. I think Reiner was right to maybe do that. It's like, then you lose what it is that because people are equally following both of these characters. I think to a point, I mean, obviously a little more for the Paul Sheldon, but I think it was a wise choice, even though it does lose some of its power.
One of the things that we haven't touched on yet that I really, really like about the film is Frances Sternhagen and Richard Farnsworth.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
The whole their relationship is really.
I've got a system.
Yes, it's just perfect. And what's really cool is the way you follow him as he's kind of piecing things together and doing it, and what it does to subvert that whole your expectation that here's the savior is
right. It's different in that, at least when you're, I can't speak to reading it, but when you're watching the movie, you really want him to not figure it out, because you can, at least me, I want him not to. I mean, I'm being pulled along by what's happening, but there's nothing. There's virtually nothing good. You're filled with such dread, and Annie has so much power over the narrative and everything that's happening that you really don't feel like this is the guy that's going to come save the day. This is, even though he does indirectly, to be fair to him.
Yeah.
You almost don't want this sweet guy to get involved in this stuff at all.
That's the thing. What happens to him
it works on you both ways, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
What happens to him is as horrifying as what happens to Paul, in a way.
No, because I mean, Paul is going through months. This guy walks in and
pop
blammo.
Yeah, but he's this guy you cared about.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
And
but
his wife, and he also their relationship, and then
and as functionaries of the movie, Frances Sternhagen and Farnsworth, Richard Farnsworth, they are that moment of where we can breathe again.
Yep.
Oh, for sure.
And so as we're watching it, there are these, and so that's another reason why you're like, and as he gets closer, I think I would agree.
I read a review of this that poo-pooed that part of the story. Like, I'm like, every time I'm like, oh my God, I'm so bored. I just wanted to reach in the computer and wring that person's neck.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's form and function working really, really well. You're an idiot.
And it's because
and a masochist, or what is it when you want the other people to be hurt?
Sadomasochist.
No. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, but yeah,
he just wanted to get back to the torture. Take me back to the torture.
But
oh my God!
Thing I'll say, I don't want
no chemistry.
The other thing I want to say, one of my favorite things about it, because again, we talked about how layered and odd and weird that Bates' performance is, but nothing gives me more pleasure than when she does the kind of dreamy, oh Paul. It's just, I'm like, it's so grotesque, but I don't know, Bates is just.
She does it all. She
earned that Oscar.
She won the Oscar.
Yeah, for sure.
Rightfully so. I don't think you can say there was a more memorable performance by a woman in that year.
I have always said that perhaps Angelica Houston and the Grifters would have been a word.
But that part is awesome. I would agree with you, but it doesn't stand a chance against Kathy.
No.
Yep.
It just didn't stand a chance.
Agreed.
And not because it's demonstrably worse, but because from
The way
I
the
will
plot-
remember Annie for the rest of my days. You just,
Yeah.
you know, it's.
Oh, Paul.
Oh, Paul. All right. So our next film.
And we knew who Angelica Houston was. We had no idea who
True.
Kathy Bates
Sure.
was.
True.
For all we knew, a matter of fact, her Oscar speech, because this is back before the days of special features and all this stuff.
Yeah.
They weren't doing Entertainment, Tonight interviews with her or anything. Her Oscar acceptance speech was the first time I saw Kathy Bates ever. This person who's not this crazy psycho from the movie. Mm-hmm. And it was like, whoa, who's this? Now we know, but at the time that was amazing. She's just this lady who's humbled and amazed to be holding an Oscar. Like I thought, I couldn't believe it.
I used to record.
I thought she was going to hit one of the models over the head with the Oscar and start stabbing people.
I used to record the Oscars on VHS for many years as a child and as a teenager, and I rewatched her acceptance speech for Misery numerous times. Like there was something about it that, and I think it speaks to what you said, Ryan. It's this nobody that is just kind of come out. Wow. There's something exciting about that,
Yeah, it's really cool. I agree. Yeah.
All right. Well, we had talked about, the gap between 5 and 4, between Dead Zone and Misery. There's a equally big gap now between our number 4 film and the top 3 films.
Really?
Yeah. So number
I thought
3.
They were all in the 30s ish.
No. This one was under the Ryan counting system.
I just want to point out I am so on edge right now.
Anyway,
it's just there's only 3 left. They're all going to be top 3.
I know, but
it's all going to work.
But it's a matter of what. Yeah, it's a matter of is Michael's number 1 movie gonna be number 1? Number 3 is Stand By Me.
Woo!
Yeah, another. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I just was going to say that I think I had this at number 3 and Carrie at number 2, and I believe I swapped them last minute because I'm like, you know what? As much as I love Carrie, Stand By Me speaks to me. I guess Carrie did too, but speaks to me on a very personal level.
You did not swap them.
I did not. So Carrie was number 2.
Yep.
Well, there was the inner struggle. So I love this film with everything.
Yeah, I loved the story. I loved the movie. There's very little of this book of this movie that is. I mean, it's got a great a villain, for lack of a better, it's in Kiefer Sutherland. It's such a good film. It's great to see. I even remember when it came out, to be able to see young men, be able to show affection towards one another. In a very real way. That was
in a way where they're still competitive with each other. They're still ragging on each other.
They're still ragging on each other. But when it comes down to it, they have each other's back, and and they're like, no, and it's the 4 of us, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna. It's that whole thing of like, I can bust this guy's balls because he's my buddy, but don't you do it?
Sure.
It's not bullying. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly correct.
So, I think this is the quintessential coming of age film. I think that what is so strong about this, it's those relationships, but other than Wheaton at some points, I think the performances are very strong, but I don't think Wheaton necessarily handles it perfectly all the time. That's just always, but even as a child seeing this movie, I couldn't quite.
He stands out as inferior to you.
Yes. Thank you. That's a perfect way to put it. But I think what's special about it is, yes, the foursome, because it's important to see Phoenix's character and Wheaton's character, because you realize that Teddy and Vern bail at the last minute, which I think is important to see that, Phoenix and Wheaton's character would never do that.
Yeah.
And I think, despite the fact that, like you said, Joel, these 4 kids were they would kill each other or kill someone to help them. It's an interesting thing at that very last minute that they bailed.
Yeah,
They
I mean,
didn't stick around.
it's that thing within it's that subgroup within groups of friends. You know, it's like the four of them are like awesome friends, but really within that, it's you know, it's
also it's a human thing to do. What they've agreed to take on and what they've marched all this way to do. It just can't. It's a very human and very. It's easy to sympathize with for me. Chickening out, I guess. It's not an unreasonable thing to do under the circumstances. Right. So you don't.
No, I don't disagree what the characters did. It's just, I think, an interesting highlight of what the real true friendship is in the film.
Sure.
I mean, it speaks to Chris's character, which is what it's all about, recollecting after finding out he's died, doing what he always does, is standing up for someone.
Right.
This movie breaks my heart every time I watch it.
I guess my one knock on it would be sort of what, like last week, Ryan talked about with Drew Barrymore. Is there is an element there's sometimes it feels like, and maybe Michael, this is what you're talking about with a little bit with Will Wheaton. There's a few moments where they're acting.
Yeah.
And you see them, you know, there's other moments where they're just kids.
Yes.
Having fun, and it just happens to be captured on film.
Yeah.
And that's tremendous. But there are a few times where
it all works here, I believe, and it doesn't.
Sure.
I was just ripping on Rob, which is fun for me to do. He can take it.
Yeah.
But in all of his films, he's an actor director, and he always gets the human element right. And it may be that with these kids, the scenes that you're talking about, and I kind of know a couple of bits come immediately to mind. Were probably the best he could do on the day, and you got to move on. They're kid actors after all.
It's the crying sequence.
But
Phoenix sells it. Wheaton doesn't sell it.
But
there are no real tears.
But he still
makes a difference.
Oh, I was thinking about the leach sequence.
Yeah, that's another one. Those are the two things I thought of.
Yeah.
So I totally get it.
The big difference is in Firestarter, Drew Barrymore is bad throughout almost.
Yeah, but she's not bad.
And
she's a good
just
actor.
Acting.
Who doesn't know how to be a kid. That's the problem. It's not that she's bad. She's great in it in a weird way that isn't actually good acting. I don't know.
I feel like O'Connell
moments where you see that happening.
Right.
But it's
I feel like O'Connell in Stand By Me is the most organically realistic performance.
I agree.
Everyone else has had a lot of experience. I don't know what O'Connell's experience was prior, but I feel like O'Connell as Vern, that's the one that you look at like there's all natural there. There's nothing, there's no gears running in his head. He's just doing his, wow. Someone just
that was
outside.
That was Will Wheaton coming over to kick your ass.
I want to share a story of this real quick. This came out in '86 and it was an immediate on HBO. I think we actually rented it even before it was on HBO, but this was a year after I saw Day of the Dead, which you all know is a movie that terrified me and formed me and shaped me. There's a line in Stand By Me, and I was still reeling after Day of the Dead for a year or two, like as far as being terrified about zombies. And there's a line where are talking, and Vern and Teddy have gotten further ahead on the tracks, and they're talking blah blah blah, and they turn around and he's like, come on, let's get going. By the time we get there, he won't even be dead anymore. As a little child, a 12-year-old kid, I know, like for years, Stand By Me had a completely different tone to me. And the fact that, of course, they're going to see a dead kid after I've been terrified by zombies, that's the first strike. Second strike, Teddy saying that line, I'm like, this is crap. I can't watch this movie. And up until maybe 5 years ago, the first time they actually show the kid, I was waiting for him to blink and wake up.
Yep.
And that's how terrified I was with that film the first time I saw it, because it had a whole nother meaning to me. And up until maybe 5 years ago, I covered my eyes when they showed his face because it freaked me out.
Well, and in Stephen King cinema, this is the first non-horror Stephen King film really to exist. And part of you are the first time through. I remember I saw this and Platoon in the same afternoon at a cheap theater by myself, and you're waiting for the horror to start. You know, at a certain point, I stopped thinking about that, so I wasn't as intense about it as you were. But I at the same time, I get what you're saying. You're waiting for something to jump out of the shadows or something. It's not that kind of story, and it's great. I rip on it sometimes. I tease it, I guess, because I don't rip on it. It's such a good-hearted tale, and it's so well done. But I tease it for being, it's sort of a little baby boomer fantasy. And any of their films where they're stroking each other's backs for their old stories, I think are sort of silly. But Steven, what he brings to it and what Goldman pulls out of that story and makes it into a really smart script the collaboration is perfect. And then it's great that Reiner comes along, because he doesn't have to be Brian De Palma. He just has to get the emotional beats right and point the camera at the right things, and you're home free. And a lesser director like Brian De Palma would have missed some of that crap. We'd have had we'd have cameras spinning around and things, all this stuff, but we would have missed the simplicity of his story. And there's another Stephen King movie that I think is great. I suppose we'll talk about at some point, that same thing, simplicity in storytelling, and a story that is worth telling simply, where all the effectiveness comes from that. And I think that's just a testament to everybody working on the thing. I don't know. It's a simple, perfect story that resonates with us. It's adapted perfectly. It's shot and captured as best as you can imagine. It's really everybody doing a great job.
And getting that
That's
song
nothing
written
more fabulous than the Lardass story.
The Lardass story is very funny, and to get that song written for this movie,
right?
That's great.
Really lucky, really.
Huey Lewis's or Ray Parker Jr.'s.
Ray Parker Jr.'s "Stand by Me."
Stand by me. Oh Lord.
There's a couple of things I really love about. I love the guys sitting around the fire talking, and that's what the hell is Goofy. I mean,
Pez, cherry
all
flavored
of that
Pez.
just
Pez.
Those are the story or the conversations you have as a kid, and they seem so important, and it just gets all that right. My favorite story about this is Stephen King's in a grocery store, and some lady comes up to him and says, "I know who you are. You're that writer. You write those horrible horror movies and stuff." And she goes, "You should write something like, why don't you write something nice like Stand By Me? That movie, that's so good." And he's like, "I did write that," and she wouldn't believe him that he wrote it. But the thing is, what I love about Stephen King as a writer is all of his books, well, not all of them, but most of them, particularly later in
have
his
some
career,
element of that.
Yes, that's really what the writing is these relationships and these characters, and that they do feel real. And this movie is like a perfect Stephen King movie, not being what everybody thinks Stephen King is.
Sure. Well, I wonder what he comes up with first. It's like, do you come up with like Cujo? Do you come up with the crazy rabid dog insane thing and like, okay, but now I'm going to focus on the characters. Like you get the first crazy idea, but it's,
My understanding is that is exactly how it works for him. Some idea that is something different that he hasn't done, but that human element finds its way through in the process of putting
But
words to
that's
paper.
the best writing, when the things are incidental, but you're focused on the characters and these real people. That makes the difference.
I agree.
And what's interesting about the way he does write it, he has his idea when he starts. He doesn't plot anything out. He doesn't do whatever. He's sometimes surprised where the story goes. He didn't think it was going to go there, because he views himself as an archaeologist. He's uncovering the story as he goes. And I think that kind of makes.
I read On Writing this year as well, so I know. I remember.
Isn't that fantastic?
Reading that. Yeah, it's really good.
All right, we got 2 more movies to get. We're running out of time. We got to go.
Number 2.
Stand By Me. It's awesome. We all agree.
Stand By Me.
Yes.
Number 2 is a movie that if you turn on TBS at any given moment, chances are you're gonna see it, and that, of course, is The Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
Who's the name? Who's the actor who plays the prison warden in Shawshank Redemption?
Clancy
great
Brown.
Huh?
No, he's the
no.
guard.
Oh,
He's
the
the guard.
oh, you mean the warden?
The warden.
Bob Gunton.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. He's third billed in it. He's third billed in Shawshank Redemption. It's one of his highest billings of his career. And he says this film gets played so often that he earns $100,000 annually in residuals for
Oh
it.
my God.
Wow.
This
Yeah.
comic director. Yeah.
It's
Wow.
all things aside, Stephen King, whatever, something about Shawshank Redemption. It's literally by people's choice the most popular movie of all time. So it's very difficult to. It almost feels it's quietly, while we've all basically been adults, it's quietly gone from being a really good movie that not that many people saw, but got nominated for a bunch of Oscars in a really strong year for films, and it's gone from taking over The Godfather as the greatest American film. I mean, list after list after list. If the people have a vote, not just the critics, even the critics love it, but Shawshank comes out number one almost all the time and still does to this day. Its legacy hasn't waned. That's stunning to me, and it can't be denied, whatever even our opinions are. But according to our list, we all love it as well.
But this is what's interesting about Shawshank Redemption. It's one of those films, first of all, that if it's on, I'll watch it. If I'm flipping channels, like you said, TBS, it's like, oh, okay, I'll watch it.
It's the most common movie where that thing is said about it by people in general.
But it was kind of weird to me to place this in so high up on my list because I don't consider it one of my favorites. In fact, for a lot of years, I always felt it was kind of a cliche when people are like, what's your favorite movie? Oh, Shawshank Redemption. I'm like,
right.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a good movie. It's strong, but
it wasn't super high on your list. It was 7. It got on there.
Yeah, but that's top 10. And for movies I don't consider a favorite in any list. I mean, as a Stephen King list, yes. But it's just interesting to me that it has kind of, like you said, Ryan, taken this journey to just becoming something way beyond what it originally was.
I'll say something real quick, and then because I don't want to blow through Shawshank, but we kind of have to. That's where we've left ourselves here in the show, and I think Shawshank sort of speaks for itself. But I'll say what I think it is, Michael, because I don't really know what touches people, and what touches people universally is hard to peg. So I don't know, but this is what I think when I watch it. And I watched it again recently, and it's not a movie I watch every time it's on, and I don't watch it even if it's halfway through. And I pick my shots with it, and I don't watch it every year, which there's a lot of worse movies I do. But I watched it again recently, and the cinema of it is outstanding. Roger Deakins is a cut above the rest. Long before that film came out, and currently still, he's just has a very, very special eye. He's working with a first-time director whose focus is entirely on the people and the relationships, and he's got these technicians who are working fantastically in the background. But that said, there's nothing special really cinematically about this. When you think about the shot with the rain coming down, some of the iconic stuff, but even that stuff, this is a simple human story about relatively simple people with situations that are very easy to quickly understand, relationships that border on cliche, but having all these details in them to make them transcend that. And it's shot and told simply. It's a simple moral story told in a simple way, and I think that affects all of us. The fact that the film comes out and that it rewards our faith and our caring with simple justice, which we all love, but simple justice that feels earned, which it rarely does, certainly in television, but in film as well. Just bring the whole thing home. It fills you with hope. You care. And it fills you with hope. Hope is a great thing when you spend 2 hours and change in a prison and you come out the end of it feeling good about things. It's an amazing accomplishment in that way. So I have Shawshank. Yeah, it was a tough call, but I had it first on my list, actually.
Interesting.
Rob, what do you think from a Stephen King standpoint? What is this film?
Well, it's very good adaptation. It's very faithful. It's interesting that of the top 9, 5 of them are directed by either Frank Darabont or Rob Reiner. Obviously, these guys know how to adapt his work.
Well, and don't again, nothing against Rob Reiner, but don't forget William Goldman, who's is the superstar of Misery and Stand By Me.
Yeah.
Not that Rob Reiner's any thing to scoff at, but it's Darabont the writer and Goldman the writer. They're both writers along with Stephen King. Reiner isn't a writer. The writing makes a difference in the adaptation, makes the biggest difference in my opinion.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Darabont is he actually got his start directing with a Stephen King Dollar Baby. You guys know what those are?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first thing he directed, was a Dollar Baby Stephen King adaptation. And Stephen King liked it so much that, he was open to him, taking on Shawshank Redemption, and then obviously,
which was Darabont's dream project. That was, there was also this sense that he knew exactly the film he wanted from that story, and that sort of, run with it, son, kind of deal came together there. Without a whole hell of a lot of studio help or interference, because it was a modest film as well.
Right. And it
period details and stuff, but all shot in one location, very simply made. Made a difference.
I mean, and what can you say about it? It's just perfect on so many levels that it's not, there's some films where you go, boy, that's just a perfectly made movie, that everything works. Not my favorite. It's not the greatest movie of all time. Something that has flaws in it is, for some reason.
Or maybe its storytelling ambitions aren't high enough to sort of get it up on that list. But it really does feel like they didn't misstep ever.
Yeah.
Even the things they changed from the book are almost uniformly not better than the book, because a story is a novella is one thing and a movie is another. But the changes they made are all more cinematic.
Yes.
Better, bigger payoff things that work better in a movie setting. It's kind of cool.
Or you change the color of red so that Morgan Freeman can play it, and I mean,
and still
perfect,
and still joke about it in a way that feels totally organic in the movie. I mean, come on,
that Irish line is good.
Yeah,
it's funny stuff. And what's Shawshank Redemption, the movie without Morgan Freeman? I mean, even put a great Irish actor in that role, but you can't imagine it that way now.
He's the heart of it.
Yeah,
he really is. Because Tim Robbins' character is such a sort of a cipher,
Right.
It's hard to find the end to him because he's a cold fish, sort of. But
he has his tantrums and his freak out when he thinks he should be getting free.
Right.
Even when we know later what's going on behind the scenes with him, that's very real. So Robbins has his moments, but I think you're right. The film is from Freeman's perspective, and he gets to know Robbins' character really, really well, but he never really gets to know him. That's the promise of the end of it. These guys are really going to know each other now. They're going to be pals. I mean, what could be happier? I'm sorry to spoil the end of Shawshank Redemption, but
if you are listening to this or watching this video, you can turn on TBS or TNT
and see it for yourself.
To watch it, and that way, and even though the
just
payoff
wait
is
a little
still
bit.
good,
If it's not already on, it will be on shortly.
Yeah, because they just play it in a loop. They just they have the Shawshank button that they're like, what are we playing tonight? I don't know, and they just hit the Shawshank button and it plays for 8 hours. All right, well, Shawshank Redemption, super film. Let's move on to our number one film in the Stephen King adaptation. Super spectacular, and of course there's only one movie that it could be at this point.
Dreamcatcher,
Lawnmower Man,
Maximum Overdrive.
No, of course it is The Shining.
Woo!
The hilarious romp through the hotel. The Shining.
This wasn't even in my top 20.
No, I haven't seen this actually.
I mean, there's really, I mean, it's an iconic film. I mean, it's part of our film language. I mean, it is, it's like the Wizard of Oz or something like that. I mean, you make references to something in terms of The Shining.
Yeah.
It is ubiquitous in that sense. It's
the opposite of Shawshank in almost every way. It's entirely cinematic and everything is thought through. It's more like Carrie in that way. And it's effective in the same way as Carrie, because the thing that is working on you is primal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always have to be perfect, or it doesn't always have to, catch the realistic human element. It just has to deliver on those things thematically. It has to deliver hardcore on them, and it does repeatedly over and over and over again throughout. So actually that maybe makes me respect Carrie a little bit more. Although I said I had that pretty high on my list, but
man, it makes me like Carrie less.
Does it?
I
just never.
The Shining,
I don't tie the two together. I think The Shining is
no.
brilliant. I think Carrie is overcooked in a kind of great way. I don't feel the same way about them, but what's great about both of them is what I'm saying, which is that it's primal. It's primal. It works on you in a creepy way which you can't get at or touch, but it's there, and that's what's so great about it. And all the Steadicam shots and all the weird stuff and everything that's done, the useless cuts to Tuesday or 11 o'clock, like, that don't help tell the story at all. And yet every single one of them, like, they make you,
they're jumpy. It's like,
they work on you in here, primal. They make you feel something, Tuesday, oh my God, what's going to happen?
It's true.
I've been terrified of Tuesdays ever since.
This has kind of got the same sense of anticipation that Misery did. Because things are going downhill, but it's like, how bad is it going to be on this Tuesday? Because each time you come back and there's been a transition of time, it's like, oh God. It's a matter of kind of burying or putting a barrier up and preparing yourself, like, okay, and then, he's watching cartoons. He's just going to go to the bedroom. Okay, well, that's not good either. So, it's a really, I saw this during my horror heyday, and so I think obviously as a probably 11 or 12-year-old, a lot of this went over my head, but it sure scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, like Joel was saying, there are images in here that are beyond iconic. I mean, obviously the Here's Johnny's the easy go-to, but things like the elevator,
the twins,
can we get an answer on that officially, Rob? Are they twins? I thought they said at the beginning of the movie that they're different ages.
Yeah, I can't remember now.
Well, I mean twins in the sense that they're dressed like twins. They're dressed
sisters.
alike. They're sisters.
But we all call them the twins.
You're right.
I'm quite certain they're not twins.
They're on all the merchandise. They're the Grady twins, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, when in doubt, you're right. It's
I don't know. Just
ask
the
toys.
Yeah, look at the toys.
But yeah, there's so much stuff in here that is such nightmare fuel. I mean, the old hag in the tub is just beyond tasteful. Like that whole sequence as a kid, I'm like, oh, nakedness, nudity. This is great. Oh,
yeah,
no.
What? That's not how this is supposed to go. Yeah.
Other than the naked ladies.
Yeah.
There's hats off to the ghost too, Joe Turkel and who plays Grady, that great British actor. Philip Stone.
Joe Turkel.
Joe Turkel plays the bartender.
Oh, okay. It's
no money's no good here.
Yeah, the guy that plays the caretaker was the priest in Flash Gordon. For anybody.
Yeah, he was also the British colonial soldier in Temple of Doom. Philip Stone, he's a really just great. He was first with Kubrick in his period film. What's that called, Rob?
Barry Lyndon.
Thanks, Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
That's where they met. But it's just that whole scene it's awesome when he's slowly cleaning the thing and just the way he talks, and you've always been the caretaker. The ghosts. Mm-hmm. The ghosts are great, and Kubrick says it's one of his most hopeful movies because it there's no doubt about it. that these are ghosts. There's something going on here, that it's not just in his head or whatever. They toy with that idea early in the film, but once he gets let out of the freezer, I mean, I no way he could have gotten out of that freezer except some other element interfered on his behalf. And
according to The Simpsons, Pinhead and Freddy let him out. So,
that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's canon.
But my point is, that's fun. And there's a shorter British edit of it that I miss some of the things from the version I'm used to, but it's even better because it pulls back on the supernatural, because you don't need much supernatural when you're murderous and going insane to push you over the edge. So, and you don't need 11 things for our heroine to scream at when 7 will do the trick just fine.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I think it's interesting. I read somewhere that someone was talking, maybe it was a critic or something, about the casting of Nicholson. It's like, I mean, he's kind of cuckoo from the very get-go in that interview. He's already like, this guy's kind of weird.
Or in the drive-up, he learned it on the television. I mean,
television. Yeah, it's not, because obviously the book there's a little more subtle progression as far as
he's a downright sympathetic character in the book. In the film, he really isn't for a second. Sometimes you're like, yeah, she would drive me crazy too, but that's no excuse to go
for sure,
butchering people with a hatchet.
But I mean, everyone always gives kudos to Nicholson because he just is off his rocker. But I think Duvall is fantastic in this film. It's another one of those, where in your brain did you have to go to pull off some of this? And I know Kubrick was.
Well, I was going to say that she didn't have to go very far, because she was being tortured by the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Every moment she was on the set, she was being harassed and tortured and prodded by him. And if you watch, there's just a little bit of it in Kubrick's daughter's behind the scenes footage.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, it is jarring. I mean, I don't want to.
She's forgiven him, and she's even thanked him since.
Well, she's so good.
Yeah.
I mean,
but she kind of went nuts in real life too, and I always feel
that was an instigator.
No, I don't know. I just, and I don't want to give her a diagnosis. I'm not a doctor, but I know that later in her life she struggled with mental issues.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's an instigator. I think that's part of her makeup as a person. I think if you watch her in anything, any of the Altman films, Bernice bobs her hair, even her own.
Fairy tales.
Yeah, she's an odd duck. And that's what's so great about her.
Well, what's great about Duvall is, I mean, she hits all the emotions at the end, and it's just, like I said, a constant barrage. It's like, I can't imagine you did this. Who did we talk about? I think Dee Wallace last week for weeks on end. You're shooting this. It's like, my God. But my favorite moment from her,
Dee Wallace is a technical actor. Shelley Duvall's just a model who was manipulated and poked and prodded into being hysterical all the time. It is
right, but there are moments. There's my favorite acting moment in the film is when she's talking to the psychiatrist after Danny falls down. It's when she's telling the story about
something you do 100 times with a child.
Exactly, but it's the line delivery, and I say this to Elwood all the time, and he drives him nuts. But it's that's a good thing because now he hasn't had any alcohol in 3 months. And I'm like, that delivery is so perfect.
And the child psychologist is just the whole time
because she's a terrible liar, but she brings that. I don't know what prodded her there, but that line delivery I rank as one of the highest in cinema history because it is so obvious he's trying to make it look good, and honey, it ain't. So
in her little mom overall weird apron / dress she's wearing, and the whole it's not, again, it's a Stephen King list, so it must be said that Stephen King doesn't like this movie. He's tried to say nice things about it through the years, but you can even tell he doesn't want to be saying nice things about it. He's frustrated by it. It follows the notes of his plot, but it seems to get his characters all completely backwards and wrong, which we all agree are the best thing about Stephen King books.
Yeah.
Rob, you want to talk about I don't want to get into, his book is this, his book is this.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the differences or whatever, but yeah, I mean, they are totally different
Mhm.
feel to them.
Right. The female
sort of
character in the book is a
message.
fairly liberated sort
Yeah.
of. She's not a weird, strange, twitchy person. She's this sort of prom queen that suddenly has to get tough and deal with some situation she's never had to deal with. And the guy is fighting, man. He's fighting for his life and his family the whole time, and he loses the fight, but he's fighting the whole time. Whereas Jack's just like, look, baby, I've come home.
Right.
Set me up with my imaginary liquor, you know, blah blah blah. Let me get to typing. He's off his rocker. It is true, and we seem to not care when we watch the movie, but
right. The movie is just such its own thing that is so perfect for what it is that I separate the two sort of.
Sure.
And what's great is with Dr. Sleep how you're able to kind of bring
that's
that
the whole
back
thing
into
is
the
to bring
fold
them back
and-
together. We can all live together.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can like The Shining and you can like the book, and everything's going to be all right.
Right. And you know, and
goodness will prevail.
The thing that's missing for me that I think is really powerful about Jack's character in the book is they deal much more with his alcoholism and his struggle with that.
Which is what it was about for King.
Yes. It's really what the movie is about, or the book is about, and the movie isn't about that. Alcohol plays a part in it, but it's
makes
a very minor part or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, the movie doesn't need that. The movie doesn't need that. It's a very powerful part of the book.
Well, and the film's got a lot going on about the history of America and the prosperity of America built on the ruins of another civilization. There's all this crazy imagery in it like that. The design of the hotel, the entire interior of the hotel was built from scratch in England and lit like it's a real place, and you really believe it's a real place somehow. It's got the first use of Steadicam, obviously the long shots of the big wheel through the corridors. We've talked about the iconic visual moments. Every minor player in it is out of a comedy and not a drama. The two cats in the interview in particular, all the best people. That weird scowling frowny guy he brings in who seems to know somehow that we're sending this guy to his doom. Scatman Carruthers, and even Scatman's phone conversations, like it's all hyper real, and it's usually everything I don't like about films. But Kubrick was a master, and he's at work, and you can't. It's like you can rip on it or complain about it or point it out, but it's sort of still unimpeachably powerful, and that's what more can you ask from a movie, honestly.
Well, and I do want to recommend, if you guys have seen it or any of your listeners or /watchers, Room 237.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating, so I would recommend that after.
I think that's a lot of hoo-ha.
I watched it,
but it's interesting to watch.
It's interesting. It's just made by a bunch of guys there's so much in The Shining that's actually there for you to discover, to just be loading it full of weird conspiracies and stuff that aren't there.
Oh, I don't necessarily buy into it, but as a watch, I'm like, this is interesting. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff, but okay.
I saw it right after it came out, and then I just watched it last Thursday night with George, because we watched The Shining and Dr. Sleep last Sunday, and then I said, have you seen that? He goes, I don't think I have, or he had, but he'd like to see it again. And I watched it again. It's not as good the second time. The first time you're just like, these people are so nuts. It's crazy. And, you know, at times you're like, yeah, I can kind of see that. That is weird.
It's a fun documentary because it is made by crazy people and it's about crazy stuff. And that is in there. So I agree.
Yeah.
I just urge people there's some really smart essays written by some very clever people out there about the deeper meanings of The Shining that are really worth learning. Please make up your own mind. Don't necessarily listen to the crazy conspiracy guys tell you what it's about. That's all I'm saying. Word of warning. That is a fun documentary because y'all are as we all are analyzing every shot of The Shining, like you all are into this way too much.
I love it when they overlap the forwards and backwards screening and show the matches up. And
yes.
that is
super cool.
That is interesting. There's no way any of that was intentional.
Mhm.
You don't edit a film by constantly matching up. Okay, what matches up now if I played it backwards with that cut? That doesn't happen. That's insane.
It's still
but it's
spooky
fun.
cool when it happens on the documentary. I agree.
Yeah.
I think overall the takeaway from The Shining is that I agree your terminology, Ryan, primal. There's something else at work, know, and whatever, Kubrick was Mr. Kubrick. Sorry, I had to. Whatever he did, it worked, regardless of the fact that he went so far away from the source material. There's a reason that we're still talking about it and discussing it and marveling at it.
Putting it at the top of the mountain.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, every shot is a beautiful shot. I don't think there's any wasted film in that. And it's the difference between Firestarter, where you felt like they just pointed the camera or the running man, or
they had cool cameras and nice lighting, but they didn't give a lot of thought to what they were showing. I agree.
Everything seems planned, but not in a this is boring. It's so meticulous. It just all works.
Some people are bored by it.
It's
it's a legit reaction to
if it's done well. Yeah,
me too. As a matter of fact, when it's done well, it's the best.
Yeah,
it's when it's not done well, it's the boringest. So I get it. Yeah. It's a fine line you're walking when you take on something like that.
All right. Well, so that is the list of the four of us, the collective Stephen King top 20 film adaptation countdown.
Sorry for
list.
The crazy long Shining-like length of our episode.
Are we out of time?
Yeah. We are pretty much out of time. Yeah.
Okay.
So disagree with us? Did you feel like the Tommy Knockers should have been on the list somewhere?
Did you agree with us? Do you think Graveyard Shift definitely shouldn't be on the list somewhere?
Yes. And are you as mad as Michael that Carrie is not higher on the list? Please let us know. Reach out to us. You can comment if you are watching this on YouTube, you can comment below. And obviously you can click and subscribe there. If you're you can always reach out to us at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram. And
good spot.
What's that?
I'm just backing you up. Good spot. Twitter, Instagram.
Yep. And
Facebook.
Facebook on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on the Facebook, and Ask Joel and Ryan at gmail.com. Thank you all so much for joining. Rob, Michael, thank you all so much for joining us once again. This is absolutely a wonderful, wonderful adventure with you guys.
See you guys.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.